Good evening, everyone who have already joined us. Some people said they can't hear us yet. Nobody is talking yet. We're gonna give it about one. Actually, I guess maybe we should start at 7:05. So we wanted to give people a little time to get started and get in here, but we will get started. I am Maureen Cook. I'm the principal at Wyckoff Elementary School. We are very excited that we were able to join with the other K-3 buildings to invite you to this presentation. So we have Wyckoff, Town Center, Maurice Hawk, and Dutch Neck. Families all invited to this evening. Tonight, our title for the evening is Elementary Curriculum and Instruction, and we are so lucky to have three presenters for you tonight. We have Melissa Pearson, who is our math supervisor for K-5. We have Lindsay Jablonski, who is our ELA supervisor for K-5. And we have Christine Capassi, who is the Director of Data Assessment and Accountability for our district. So this is a webinar. So what that means is you will be able to see and hear everything, the presentation. But if you do have any questions for us, you should put them in the chat, and we will be monitoring the chat all through the evening. We also have Laura Bruce, sorry, Laura, here on the panel with us, assistant principal from Dutch Neck. So we will be, that's who you are seeing on your screen right now. But so we will be monitoring the chat for you. If we are not able to answer all of your questions tonight, please feel free to reach out to any of our presenters. They're always available. So with that being said, we hope this is a really informative night for you, and just enjoy.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to kick us off. Thank you so much for inviting us and having us here tonight. We're very happy to be sharing about curriculum and instruction and assessment tonight. So we are really pleased to be here and so happy to speak to our families and our communities today. So it's nice to have all of you here. We have around 86 people, which is amazing. So we're going to get started. We wanted to kind of share with you that in October, the state developed new state standards for ELA and for mathematics, and Dr. Pearson and myself are working diligently with our staff in revising our curriculum so that our students will have curriculum that matches our new state standards for implementation starting in September 2024. So this work is ongoing and continuous, and it's really wonderful. The work we do in curriculum and instruction and assessment is truly grounded in our district's strategic goals and our mission. So they are right here on that slide for you. Our first goal, really to kind of sum it up, is really about supporting all students in the classroom, making sure that they have what they need for their learning. Our goal 2 is really about giving our students the opportunity to not only take that learning, but to become active members of their community and the global world at hand. And then our goal 3 is really about making sure we're supporting our students, not just academically, but socially and emotionally, and thinking about them through that whole child lens. So therefore, we have our every child, whole child, global child. But of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't include in our curriculum things about equity and inclusivity, and making sure that all of our students have equitable access and opportunity to curriculum and instruction. So with further ado, I'm going to send it on to Dr. Capassi.
Hello, everyone, and welcome tonight. It's so great to have everybody out tonight. For my part of this presentation, I wanted to talk a little bit about assessments in the elementary school. They're used to guide educators to understand your child's learning journey, and equitable assessment practices in our school district aim to empower students to recognize and develop their own talents and skills. and for teachers to advocate for the unique needs of our students. We consider assessments as checkpoints that help teachers tailor lessons to our students' needs. And they also reveal strengths and areas that our students need to grow, which give you as parents information to support your child's learning at home, and most importantly, to partner with teachers. We use assessments throughout the year to better understand how our students progress within the academic content and provide insights into their struggles and successes. So what's the purpose of assessments? Assessments are about what our students know and what they need to know. There are two vital purposes in assessments: understanding that's what students have learned, and guiding or tailoring instruction so your students can grow academically. Now, information from assessments are like windows into your child's learning journey. They highlight strengths and areas of needing support. Now, this approach to using assessments ensures that multiple measures, not just one test or assessment, is used when understanding your child and how they're learning and how they're progressing. It gives both parents and educators a fuller picture of abilities and progress, and helps us to tailor curriculum and projects and address the needs of your child. So, uh, when you think about multiple measures, I like to think about it in with the metaphor of buying a house. Just like we wouldn't use one test to decide exactly how a child is progressing, we use many pieces. You would never use just one piece of a house to decide that that is the best house for you. Instead, you'd look at different angles. You might look at where it is on the street or what kind of school district the house is in before making a purchase decision. And similarly, teachers look at all kinds of pieces of assessment information to decide what next best steps are great for your child. So we have two buckets for thinking about assessments. There are assessments for learning, also known in our education world as formative assessments. And those are tools and methods used by teachers to gauge where students are in their learning process. Those include examples like quizzes and tests, classroom observations, quick checks, questioning, and student reflections. And then there are assessments of student learning, and that helps provide a summary of a student's overall performance and mastery of the material. They're critical for determining things like grades, academic progress, and eventually things like college admissions. Think of this for learning assessments as things from your own experience, such as your SAT or your PSAT. But for our students, there are assessments like NJSLA, the COGAT, map testing, etc. So with that in mind, here are a snapshot of some of the assessments that your child has already taken or will take this year, depending on their grade level. The MAP is a formative assessment. It's a measure of academic progress. It's an adaptive test. And overall, it helps our teachers understand the instructional level data rather than the mastery level data, so that they can teach from that information that they gain about their students. Your children took the COGAT test before we left for our winter recess, and that's an ability test. It provides insights into the way your children solve and think about problems. Teachers look at that information to get a general sense of the abilities and learning styles, which can lead to further analysis and conversation. By the way, those scores will be out within the next few weeks. We have two state mandated tests: the Access for ELS. That's a state required test for students in the English Language Learner Program. It provides proficiency data on students in the areas of speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And finally, the NJSLA, which third grade students will take for the first time this year. And that measures students' proficiency in two areas, at least at the third grade level, which is mathematics And students do things like they read and analyze passages from authentic fiction and nonfiction texts and solve equations in mathematics. So that's also a state required test. Finally, think of assessments as pieces to the puzzle, a larger learning picture, providing information on your child's education journey. Together with the help of your teacher, it provides valuable insights to build a data story or a comprehensive understanding, guiding us to support your child's progress and success. It's my honor to pass this presentation along to our talented and highly regarded elementary math supervisor, Dr. Pearson.
Thank you, Dr. Capacci. Good evening, everybody. I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about math for a portion of tonight's presentation. So what we're going to talk about is having our children be doers, knowers, and sense makers of mathematics and what that means. And the way that we're going to look at that is through a couple different lenses in looking at how math has changed and some of our structures that we use. And if we were in person, I'd make you do some math, but we're going to just look through some of that and what that looks like tonight. And as we go through, you'll get a glimpse into what happens in our classrooms. Christine, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so thinking through like what's changed about maybe some of the ways that we've learned math versus what we experience now. And things do look different and feel different. And just as things evolve in, the medical field and in technology, things evolve in education too, as we know more and research more. And so things that we used to do, we may not do anymore, or it might look differently to promote a growth mindset, to have kids more actively engaged, to find joy in math and other subject areas. So what we look for now is, instead of like a timed fact sheet, fact test, a mad minute, we look at strategies and different ways to practice. So we'll take a look at some of that tonight. We also look for multiple entry points. We look for more collaboration. That doesn't mean that students aren't getting time to think on their own, but how do you take your ideas and bring those together? We use a lot of hands-on things and to learn the math. And we focus in on that conceptual understanding. So we developed several years ago what we believed as a district, what we needed for our students. And we developed this shared vision around math equity. And we believe that all learners should have access to rigorous, high-level mathematical content in an environment where risk-taking, deep conceptual understanding, and growth mindset are the norms. So again, how do we get children to be doers, knowers, and sense makers of mathematics? They may not all become mathematicians, but every single one of our children is going to be a doer, knower, and sense maker of math. And in looking at that and thinking through the idea of sense making, we look at this idea of like, who is the authority and who has that knowledge in the learning? And we look to the students for that first, and thinking about making sense of problems on your own. This diagram comes from the book called Choosing to See from Dr. Sita and Dr. Brown. And this idea of students working first to make sense of problems. We'll see that in our number sense routines and in some of our calendar math. And that comes through, and we'll take a look at what the number sense routines look like in a couple minutes. And then as a class, we make sense of the problems together. And then what the teacher will do is then figure out how to move that into building upon those strategies that have been shared. And that's where it becomes the I do, that's the teacher part. And then modeling those different problems, and then working through problems with their class, and then being able to, on your own, be able to do similar problems and transfer information and transfer skills into new topics. And so we have this model of you do, we do, I do, we do, you do, which is a big mouthful, but it's the idea and the structure of how we think about student learning. And again, for them to be the doers, to have that, to develop a positive math identity, and to also have agency around their learning. the structures that we do this in is what we call math workshops. So your children may come home and talk about math workshop and how they are working in math class. And so part of that is won't get into like the granular pieces of the structures, but math opens with a opening ritual around a number sense routine. This is a welcoming sort of ritual to open up math. It invites everybody into the conversation. It's a very open sort of conversation around some sort of math idea. And then we move into either a whole class lesson or into smaller groups. And there's always some sort of either center activities or tasks that are happening with the class. And then we like to round out math with a reflection so that you have this sort of beginning, middle, and end to every lesson so that students are that beginning piece opens it up, then we're doing lots of math, and then at the end to kind of solidify what we learned in that lesson, it's that reflection piece that's also very important. All right, so a misconception that many people have is that kids don't practice their basic facts anymore. This is not true, they do. They spend a lot of time working on their facts. It just doesn't look like flashcards or Mad Minutes we talked about in the beginning. And they also do learn algorithms. So we're always building towards efficiency in their math thinking. And so we do work on our basic facts. We spend a lot of time on that, but we spend a lot of time doing that from the building blocks up through using manipulatives on through to doing things with an algorithm later on. And the basic facts, we want to commit to memory and not necessarily memorize. So this has always stuck with me in reading some of Dr. Bowler's work around this idea of fluency. We don't expect memorization or speed in many other areas, but we really kind of expect that in math. And so we're trying to break that and think about how do we commit things to memory and slow things down a little bit. Math doesn't have to be fast for you to be good at it. So the idea here of like thinking through like how do we bring joy into math and also get to the fluency and efficiency that we have. And in thinking about that and trying to move away from this idea of memorization is this idea of the different phases of fluency. Christine, we can go on to the next slide. So I'm going to just be a little nerdy for a second. And so looking at the research around this, is Arthur Barodi's research around the phases of fluency, and students have to, and children have to move through these different phases. They can't really skip them. In that first one, it's about counting objects and verbal counting to figuring out an answer. In that second phase, they use reasoning strategies from facts that they know in order to then move into other facts. So they use the strategy they have. And then that third phase is that mastery where they're really, it just becomes that automatic piece to this and that automaticity where students then have these ideas committed to memory rather than just that pure memorization. But they do have to go through these different stages. They can't really skip them in order to really get to that really having that deep fluency around having that number sense. So what exactly is fluency? Next slide, we can go to the next slide. Is thinking through these three different pieces. It's efficiency, flexibility, and accuracy. The new standards that are coming out really focus in on this idea of being flexible and efficient, but within that, they focus in on efficiency and accuracy with flexibility built into efficiency. And so these three pieces you need to have in order to be really fluent, and accuracy is definitely part of that, but also being efficient. You could be accurate, but if it takes you a long time to do something, that might not be it's obviously not gonna be the most efficient strategy. And so part of building with the fluency and thinking about even standard algorithms is thinking about, is the algorithm even the most efficient way to do something? So a lot of our conversations with children are about, being efficient. So if we take a look at this kind of example of like a make a 10 strategy. So the basic fact would be if you had 7 plus 9, and if you were trying to make a 10, you could then rewrite that as 6 plus 10. You can see that with the 10 frames and the counters in the picture next to that. So if we can think about making a 10, 9, we need one more. We can add that together to come up with the 6 plus 10 gives us 16. Eventually, students will know that 7 plus 9 is 16, but we work on these different things to build in that strategy. And then that extends as they move up through the grades, because they can apply the same thing, same kind of thinking to 97 plus 35. And they can also apply that to when they start working with decimals. And you could see that there, where if we're using some of these different strategies at a very foundational level, at the primary level, they do carry up through to the upper elementary. And then when you're thinking about also something like this, you would not typically see this at the primary level, but as students move up, thinking about how else could 12 times 25 be achieved, and could they do that in their head using some different strategies that they've learned as building blocks through the primary levels up through the grades. They may break this apart and look at it and figure out, or they might think about it in terms of money, but really being flexible about the way that we think about things. And like I said, we don't really use, like, we could use, if you have flashcards, that's fine, but have your children sort them into like different facts that they know and the strategies, rather than it being necessarily about speed. The other thing that we do in class is we play a lot of different type fluency games where children are practicing their different facts, but through games and different activities. So number sense is the foundation for all of this higher level math that students will continue to take through, take on through high school. And I taught at High School South before I moved into the role of supervision, and students that had that number sense, I could tell that they had an easier time with the higher level math, because they just were more flexible in their thinking and more flexible with the numbers. And so we really lean into this idea of number sense, and it is the foundation for what we do. And so now we're just gonna, we could all chat, it would be great if we were in person, but just some ideas of like, what does that opening number sense carries through all the work that they do. But this idea of like, how do we open up a math class and think about different things? So on the next slide, we have what we would call a notice and wonder. And so, what do you notice? What do you wonder about? And so students will start to notice things like there are 10 peppers, 8 of them are red, 2 of them are yellow. And, and then we would go through different pieces here for them to kind of take a look at. There's 5 on each plate. And so things that we develop and have conversation around as the year moves on, they become more mathematical in their thinking around this. But the idea is to open up with something like this. This is an image talk, and where they could talk through looking at this. On the next slide, this is another different type of number sense routine of like 73 and 48. When are 73 and 48 big numbers? So when, if you were thinking about, how many hours you have to travel somewhere, or how many flowers you're holding in your hand, that might be a lot. And then you could flip it and ask when 73 and 48 are small. And that might be when you have pennies or something else to that effect. But the idea of thinking about things in terms of magnitude open up a big conversation to kids. One of the other routines that we'll do is something like this, which is a which one doesn't belong. And so kids will take a look at these numbers and come up with different ways that they see them. They may say that 84 doesn't belong because it's the only even number. They may say that 17 is prime. In a 3rd grade class one day, I heard them eliminate 17 because when you look at the number in the ones digit in each of the other numbers, you double it, you get the number in the tens, the digit in the tens place. So there's a lot of creative thinking and flexible thinking that can happen when we open up these questions or open up problems like this to students. And when we talk about looking at different tasks. If we were together, I would make you answer these questions, but if you just read through the first question for a second and then read the second one, I'll give you a second for that. That second one doesn't allow for much thinking to happen. You'd pluck the numbers out of it and then answer it. The first one, there's a whole host of questions that students have to reason with and make an argument with before they would solve something like this. And this would be an upper elementary problem to do. But the idea being here that when students to answer that first one need to make determinations around what is elementary school. Is it K-5? Is it pre-K-5? Is it 3-5? Is it K-2? They would have to make all sorts of decisions. They'd have to spend time thinking about, well, how many minutes a day do you brush your teeth? Do you go by what the recommended is or what kids actually may do? And so like there's lots of things to think about. Do you include the summer? So opening up questions and having these open-ended type problems allow students to stretch their thinking and to think about different things in different ways. All right, Christine, this next one's a video, so you're gonna have to unmute for this one. So we're just gonna take a quick look at the early number sense progressions. This comes from Graham Fletcher. He has other videos around addition, subtraction, and then multiplication, and then division and fractions. But this idea of like, what does math kind of look like at that early numeracy and counting? So he's going to start, you'll see, with kindergarten and what that kind of looks like as we move through the different pieces.
Before we ever get to addition and subtraction, and long before we tackle fractions and decimals, there's so much understanding that needs to take place. So here, I'll try to explain the progression of early number and counting. Well, before students come to us in kindergarten, they begin to see what numbers look like. I mean, literally. Check out these dice. Students know that there's 4, 2, 3, and 5, but they don't know that quantity. They're just simply calling out number names and matching them to what the things look like. They know that we have 3, 3, 5, and 4 on the yellow card. What they're doing is matching a number name to a visual pattern. This is a really big piece, but a lot of kids are able to do this before they come to us in kindergarten. This ability to recognize quantity without counting one to one is called subitizing. Some say sub, some say su. I just say it's magic. But here, if we were to show the number 4, a student might say 4. Yes, they know the number name, but if you ask them to prove it, they might count them 1, 3, 9, 7. This is a perceptual subitizer. They cannot explain why it's 4. I think most of us are familiar with the conceptual subitizer that would say 4 because there's 2 and 2 more. In this early trajectory, we're talking about a perceptual subitizer. So as students are working on this idea of subitizing, they're simultaneously building their understanding of more and less. Let's take these 2 hands, for example. If we were to put some candy in each hand, and then we were to ask a student, which one has more? I think most students are going to say the one on the right has more. And they're able to recognize this because they can visually see and compare the difference. They can't tell you exactly how many more, but that visual representation of more, well, that ties back to what they're doing with subitizing. The students don't need to count to compare the quantities. If we were to take some candies from the right hand, put them in the left hand to where they're equal or almost the same, now we have a need to count. So when students come to us in kindergarten, we now know that they have this idea of subitizing and more or less that they've been working on. So from there, we introduce rote counting. Rote counting Well, it's kind of like this. As students are learning the alphabet, they might say LMNOP and have no idea that there's actually letters embedded in there. Rote counting, same thing. Students are just working on that count sequence, the reciting of names. So an example of that would be as if we asked a student to count from 1 to 6. They might say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We said stop at 6. But you know what? They can't. They have no idea where 6 is in that count sequence. Well, in kindergarten, students should be working on that count sequence from 0 to 100, forwards and backwards. I think most students in kindergarten have had exposure to a hundreds chart or a 99 chart. But what about this one on the right? When the value increases, the numbers on the chart rise up. Now when we count up from 0, we don't go down, we actually go up. That might make more sense to kids. Something to think about. So as students are working on this idea of rote counting, we begin to introduce this idea of one-to-one correspondence. And to be honest, one-to-one correspondence, it's much more than simply tagging numbers to objects. Here's an example. If we ask a student to count 8 and place them in the bowl from a set, and they're able to do that, they're a producer of counting. They're able to do that one-to-one tagging to 8. Now, if you ask them how many were in the bowl, they don't know. They'd have to go back and recount them all over. A student that we'd ask how many didn't make it inside the bowl, well, they're a counter. They can count a finite set of a quantity. So for instance, there was 4 that couldn't make it. So we want to make sure that students are both counters and producers. And one way we can do that is by building this understanding of tagging, but not always with numbers. So here we have 6 bears and we want to match each bear to a green present. This idea that's happening in one-to-one correspondence, it's really, really big, and we need to make sure that we devote enough time for our students to develop this understanding. So as students are working on rote counting and one-to-one correspondence, cardinality gradually makes its way into the conversation. What cardinality is when students are counting out a set of objects. The last number in that count sequence describes the quantity in the set. Students might count this pattern here of these pennies, but they might double count some. So now they use a counting strategy where they line them up and count from 1 to 8, and they know that they said 8 last, so that there's 8 in the count sequence. This was an example of a counter with the pennies, and on the bottom here with the rec and rec, we have a producer of 8, and they're able to tell you that it's 8 because of the last number. We then move on to hierarchical inclusion. Yeah, it's a really big word, but all that it means is that students understand that numbers are nested inside other numbers. So if we take that penny, for example, students would know that if you had 8 pennies, you must have 7 pennies. That numbers are nested inside the numbers. So if we ask students to put 7 inside this circle, do they need to count out 7 pennies, or do they just remove 1 and drag the set into the circle? The same idea with the rec and rec. Do students count out 7, or do they just know to remove 1 because 7 is nested within the 8? And at the final part of this progression of early numbering counting comes number conservation. The big idea here is that students understand that there's a decomposition of number. We might ask, are they the same? Students would say, yeah, we have the same number. But if we stretch out the blue row and ask which one has more, students might say the blue. This is at the heart of number conservation. It's about decomposition, that numbers can be broken apart, and that numbers, the whole, is made up from parts. So at the beginning, we talked about a perceptual supertizer. Well, here we have 3 sets of 4. Well, when students get to this piece in the number sense trajectory, they understand that that 4 is made up from parts. So now when we show students these dots and we show them these yellow cards, they're able to see that 4 just isn't a name, it describes the parts of a whole. Now we're getting to that conceptual subitizing. There's a whole lot happening here. One thing to remember, the turtle won the race. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Christine. So you could see that it's the early what happens in early learning with math is rather complicated and complex, and trying to break that down and really understand where kids are in their thinking is the work that our teachers do with them. I'm taking up way too much time here, so I'm going to speed through the rest of this. But the idea around growth mindset and thinking about what that looks like in mathematics, Dr. Joe Bowler has written a couple of books. Math Mindsets is more teacher based rather than like it's a lot of classroom ideas and things in the Math Mindsets. But if you're curious about what she has to say about learning, Limitless Mind is a good read for learning about growth mindset and mathematics. And then Christine, if you go to the next slide, I'll put these links in the chat. But like ideas and resources for at home, we have an elementary math page on our website, and in there you'll see Bridges is our foundational resource, and so there are lots of good resources that Bridges has put out for families, including letters for each unit. And we created some documents around like what does the whole year look like. So those things are in the elementary math folder. Like I just said, that Bridges has 2 different family support pages. So they have different activities that you can do with your children at home. And the other page is more informational about what students are learning about. We also have Dreambox. Dreambox is available through your child's class link. And that's going to be targeted practice for them. The more that the students use it, the system tailors itself so they get a personalized experience. And we know like screen time is an issue. So if you don't want children on that for very long at night, or or whenever you're doing work with them, the idea to being like bedtime math also has some off-screen activities that you could also do with your children. Other things that don't require looking at any of this stuff would be, talking to your kids about math when you're cooking or when you're going for a walk or when you're buying groceries. And you can also, when you're working with your children, is think about just asking questions like, what do you notice? What are you wondering about? Can you tell me about it? How do you know? How did you figure that out? Did you see any patterns? Those are all good kind of open-ended questions to ask kids to figure out where they are in their learning. So I'll put the links to the pages that are these resources that I mentioned, plus the Graham Fletcher video. There was a question that came through about when multiplication comes into play, and so kids start with multiplication actually in 2nd grade when they build arrays. And then by time they get to, they don't call it multiplication then, but they start building arrays. And then they work with it in 3rd grade, 4th grade, and then 5th grade is when when we expect proficiency with multiplication, not only of whole numbers, but also with decimals and some fractions. So it works its way up. I'll also put the link in the chat for the state standards, so you could see the changes that are coming. And for math, there aren't that many, but there's a greater focus on data literacy that's coming, but we're already doing that. So it's we're in good shape, like Mrs. Jablonski said earlier, around looking at where the new standards are coming in. All right, I'm going to turn it now over to Mrs. Jablonski to talk about literacy.
Hi, everyone. So we're going to talk about phonics reading and writing workshop. So you might have been hearing in the news, and our governor just put out an address recently around reading and around phonics. So I wanted to just share with you around our district and our philosophy and how we are really looking at reading and phonics and what is going on. So on the slide that we just had up shows Scarborough's, there you go. Shows Scarborough's reading rope. And really, when we think about reading, reading is truly a complicated thing. Actually, humans were never designed to read. This is something we created. And those reading skills really come from our actual original skills of learning to kind of see out when we were hunters and gatherers and looking at tracks and things like that. That's where these ideas of becoming able to be readers come from. Like that's where those skills actually come from, because we were never genetically born to read. We created that. So there's a lot of aspects that we have to really teach children. So there are two parts of reading that are really, really important, and that create this idea of reading. So the first part of reading is really looking at the idea of language comprehension, which is like, understanding background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, and verbal reasoning, and like literacy knowledge. So just understanding the concepts of print and things like that. But then there's this whole other part, which is word recognition, or we also call it like decoding. And that's being able to pick apart sounds, notice how those sounds are attached to symbols, and then how those symbols become words, right? And then they become sight words and things like that. And we need both of those pieces to be intertwined in order to develop reading, which when we think about reading, reading is reading for meaning, reading is learning. So we need to do all of those pieces in order to really develop reading. So as a district, we are working to not only develop our students decoding or word recognition, but also their language comprehension, and put them together to be able to become lifelong readers who are using those skills to, communicate and to learn and to grow thoughts. So we start in K2 with phonics, and phonics is really what we call decoding and spelling. So that's kind of understanding that words are broken up into syllables, and that those syllables are actually are really, we want to get really technical, are phonemes and graphemes. Phonemes are the sound pieces that we hear in a word. The graphemes are the visual cue that matches that phoneme. And really what we're trying to do is teach our students that those sounds, when you hear the word, like we have the example up here, geography, but I'm going to make it even simpler, like the word cat, right? When we hear cat, that we can hear those phonemes, and then we can match them to those letters, and then together that makes a word. When we get into what's called word study in our grades 3 through 5, that we also call that morphology, but that's really thinking more about words in terms of the vocabulary, the nuances in vocabulary, the comprehension, and then again, continuing that spelling work. So the work shifts from being able to not just understand how to decode it and spell it, to really being able to understand and build that vocabulary knowledge. We do that in K through 2 as well, but not to the same extent as we're doing it in our word study. So we can just go to the next slide. So there's a progression of how these skills build, and they start, in kindergarten, from just being able for students to recognize letters and sounds, to short vowel words, which is, more towards the middle to the end of kindergarten, and then short vowel words with blends and diagraphs. So, and there's some examples, as you can see in this graphic. And then we start, in first grade, continuing with those skills through long vowel work with the final consonant E. And then we have vowel teams. Then we have what's called controlled R words. And we continue with other vowel patterns into, and this goes right into second grade multisyllabic words, and then into third, fourth, and fifth grade, where we are looking at more complex syllable types, and then of course, Greek and Latin roots. So this is all work that our students are doing on that K-5 trajectory within that phonics and word study time within our literacy instruction. We also have what's called reading and writing workshop. And though this is the structure for how we spend most of our time during literacy. Now, it depends on the grade level. In kindergarten, we have about a 40-minute workshop period, but in grades 1 through 5, we have a 60-minute workshop structure. And the way this works is we have a quick mini lesson that kind of gets our students into really direct teaching from the teacher. Students are active in that. And then they get to have some opportunity to kind of do that we do, where we practice together. And then afterwards, they break out into would be independent time. And they spend a great portion of that time in this independent time, 20 to 30 minutes, depending again on the grade level, doing this independent work that readers and writers do in the world. So that would mean, sitting and reading books, maybe talking with partnerships or talking in book clubs, or if they're in writing, spending time really writing, editing, revising, drafting, doing all of that work within that time frame. At some point during that workshop time, we'll have some type of like mid-workshop teaching point or interruption, as they sometimes call it, to remind students of the great things that we want them to continue to do and to reinforce maybe what was taught in the lesson. And then at the end of it, we really want our students to share, and it could be they're sharing with a partner, they're sharing in book clubs, but to really share and reflect on the learning and the goal work that they have done for that day. So that's something that we do each and every day. And that work is really, really important in giving our students opportunity to really practice on those skills of being readers and writers. So when we zoom in onto the workshop model teaching and what that really looks like, we have whole group direct instruction right at the beginning of the lesson for the most part. That's usually how our lesson starts. Sometimes we have inquiry lessons and other things, but for the most part, it's whole class direct instruction, letting our students know exactly what it is that they're going to be learning. There's some guided practice within this sometimes as well to kind of support our learners. Again, that's that we do together part. And then while students are independently working and independently practicing, teachers are going to be pulling small groups to really focus in on students and give them directly what they need within a small group. So that might mean, for example, if I'm teaching a second grade class, that I have a group of students that are really working on making predictions. So I'm going to pull a few of them to really work and hone in on that specific skill. Another small group that might be pulled might be to continue to work on that phonics instruction to support whatever students are doing. And the same thing, in our writers workshop, we might be pulling small groups around grammar, or we might be pulling small groups around supporting and making really strong introduction statements and things like that. But again, all of this is happening during that independent practice time after the mini lesson is taught. So when we think about our instruction, we are giving our students lots and lots of chances to have mastery and to really grow their thinking and in complexity and sophistication as we go through the grades. So our curriculum really does spiral. So when we start in kindergarten, we do a unit called Becoming Avid Readers, where students are really just learning to read voraciously, and they're getting to read lots of different types of books, and we're getting them really into fiction work. Then in first grade, we start teaching them about characters and learning lessons and what that looks like in our fiction work, and really kind of supporting them with that. Then in second grade, that unit comes back again, and now we're really working with our students on understanding about characters and lessons learned a little bit more, and really going into the idea that characters have feelings, and we're kind of interpreting that a little bit more. By third grade, we're really working on those skills of interpreting characters' feelings, and now we're getting into traits, and we're talking about the inside of a character and the outside of a character. To now in fourth grade, we're really looking at those characters very in-depthly. We're talking about those characters' actions. We're talking about what their motivations. To again, once we get into fifth grade, and that becomes even further analysis and the synthesis around multiple characters and how those characters and motivations really move the plot line in the story. So you can see how, as our curriculum moves forward, the complexity and sophistication comes with it for our students. This is the same thing within our writing curriculum as well. In kindergarten, we start kind of talking to them about what persuasive writing means and what it means to persuade somebody in our writing. And then in first grade, we start with mini writing reviews, like mini little book reviews or restaurant reviews. Then in second grade, we start really this idea about writing about our reading and talking about our opinions in books. And then in third grade, that turns into changing the world. We start talking about persuasive speeches and petitions and editorials. So really taking that global aspect into our writing. And then again, in 4th grade, we do a unit called Boxes and Bullets, which is again, taking that persuasive essay and really bringing it forward into making it actually an essay, you know, going from paragraphs to now multiple paragraphs in their writing. And then in 5th grade, now it's amped up again to research-based arguments. So now our students are doing research to create an argument around a topic. So parents often ask, what can you do to support your child's growth as a reader? One of the best things that you can do is to read to your child, read with your child, have your child read to you, talking about the books. And, you know, really, you don't want to do things where it's just like, you know, question and answer. You want to ask your children about, you know, well, what did that make you think? How did that make you feel when they're reading those books? Really just getting them to kind of open up and really think a little bit deeper about the books that they're reading. You know, at the end of the day, having your children tell you stories about their day will also kind of help with that story language as well. Writing notes to your child so that they have practice reading is great, and they love that, and those are great memories to have as well. For supporting your child around writing, we really want to talk to them about what it means to have a writerly life. You know, give them notebooks that'll allow them to practice their writing. Talk about the different types of writing that you do in your day. You know, we are all writing different things. We write emails, we might be writing lists. Writing is a big part of our world and our communication forms. So giving them access to seeing all of that is really is something that we could do. So having them help you write the grocery list or notes to the family, maybe doing daily gratitude journaling is an option as well. And then have conversations with your children around their writing. Like, what are they trying to do? Or what are they trying to make readers feel? Or what are they trying to teach in what they're writing? Because that'll help them really think through what they're doing as a writer. And then the other thing you can also do is when you're reading books to your children, you can also talk to them about what you noticed the author doing. Like, oh, did you notice that the author is trying to make us feel excited about this part? Or did you notice the author wrote in all capitals because this is a really important piece, or they're yelling, the character shouting, you know, doing those kinds of things just also helps bring those aspects of writing and what writing looks like in our world to our children.
Oh. So we are going to have Dr. Lee McDonald just talk to you for a couple minutes, but just to end this, I know that we're getting close to 8 o'clock. So hopefully, I think we were able to really monitor the chat well and reply to people as they ask questions. But as we said earlier, you can always reach out to Dr. Melissa Pearson or Dr. Christine Capacci or Lindsay Jablonski about any questions that you have relating to those different subjects that you have. We also will follow up with this slide presentation and resources for you that were shared in the chat today. So that will be coming as well. And I am just going to switch over to Dr. McDonald. Okay, he should be on the screen now, right? Okay.